Greetings, folks. I'm going to talk you through Model V. I've planned out the order of this. There's a little preview of it there. We're going to go through order in order to build on what people already know. And they probably know the MBTI model. So let's have a look at this and issue with this. What do we have here? So you've got this sort of version of INTP where it's like no FI really and hardly any NI. That's not it's not very good. I mean, INTP is a introvert and an intuitive, so you're going to be doing a lot of intuiting and a lot of introverting, so they're going to be in that state. So let's have a look at a little known typologist. I think that literally. Well, unless you watch this channel. Vanderhoop. So what I've got here is his depiction of what the mean field of consciousness is like for the extrovert and for the introvert. So for the extrovert, the outer world, you see here you've got all of these extroverting functions on the outside. And that's something I do now. I say extroverting rather than extroverted, because when was it extroverted? Extroverting and introverting are dynamic processes. I almost said processes. Dynamic processes, because you are subjectifying. And I had to try and come up with a word, so I sort of come up with empiricalizing. So at the moment I am, am I extroverting at the moment? Not really. I'm sort of like coming out with this sort of theory. So it's a bit of a combination of TI and FE, I suppose, in expressing it. So this is ENFP. Vanderhoof's got this world of possibilities, and you've got this area of FE here. So you might say, Ben, how does ENFP use FE? Well, we usually go for that advocator role, social advocate, and they have to charm people. They're expressive. They're they are expressive to emotionally expressive with FE. They have a tension within them between acceptance and approval. We could tag that with FE, and authenticity. So it's a strong function for ENFP. I call it fish's water, which is the ENFP fish doesn't know it's wet with FE, just like the INTP fish doesn't know it's wet with NI. Because when we sort of see causality, when we sort of like see how things are going to develop, we think it's because of reason, causality. But it's what leads us to think in a certain direction. I think that's the NI. So you can see here that the area devoted to the introverting functions in INTP is larger and NI is quite large. Something else to note from this graphic is that this is the mean field of consciousness, and this is the polarity, the counter nucleus. And this is where I got the idea of the counter club from. And all of these functions here, NE, NI, FE, FI, these are the NF functions. This is the club. And then this is the counter club. And again here, the NT functions, NE, NI, TE, TI. And if you look at this graphic, there, Model V, you've got the club, the strong club on the left, and then the weaker club on the right. Dario Nardi's data, this is pretty much consistent, where for ENFP, strongest, weakest, and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is roughly, the data is shown from Dario Nardi's studies and previous studies that the functions that parallel The top two are the weakest. This is also the weakest two in Socionics Model A. And these club functions have Dario Nardi's had Barime look at his data from the cognitive process assessment. That's the Keys to Cognition website. There's like 130,000 instances were analyzed. I know multiple people have taken the test more than once. So I don't know if it's 130 different IP addresses. So this is again build up. Beeb model. This is just mirrors the top two. Where's INTP? There we go. It's just mirroring it. TNISEFI. Oh, really? You think that TE is stronger than NI? Well, maybe. But again, FI is not the weakest function. Okay, it's something that we know. Weakest function. Examples of blatantly obvious weakest functions. INTJ. They're not weakest at SI. They're weakest at FE. Just like... and same with ISTJ, they're weakest at FE, reduced affect display, lack of tonality in their voice. ESTP, they're weakest at FI, just like ENTP. Right. What else? So, modalities, Model A. So notice here, strong, weak, weak, strong. And these are the club functions. Now, the club functions are the top and the bottom. Top and the bottom for the club functions. So go back to Van der Hoop. NI and TE. NE and TI. Modulators. NI. And then this would have this 4-dimensional, 3-dimensional, 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional. So these are strong and these are weak. But again, I'm in the arrangement. And again, superego. I mean, really, the functions that act as a superego are role and ignoring. Really, they're the ones that act. Like, because this sort of runs like counter to the lead, and then a little bit of the ignoring. That actually acts as superego. The SE doesn't really act as superego in the Freudian sense because it's so unvalued. It's not like a voice in your head that's a sort of a metaphor for social values and values from the parents. So this metaphor from Jung, from Freud rather, doesn't work. And then we have 21st century model G. I've done a lot of videos on that. If we look at the valued functions again, morning green, TINESIFE. And go here, TINESIFE. This is a complex model. It's got certain things in it, but we're not here to explain Model G. We're here for this, Model V. So, thing to understand here is really two ideas. Vertness or Verten, and the idea of intersecting clubs and Vertness. So again, here we have all of the NT functions, which the data shows that, so you've got Van der Hoop saying it's strong, 1937, English translation 1939. The book is Conscious Orientation, translated by Laura Hutton, I believe. So the NT functions are strong. I'm going to show you my scores. The NT functions are there. Now, a bit of an outlier. My high score for FI, but Enneagram 6 with a 4 fix and a 1 fix. So, I'm a bit of a weirdo. Now, so, building on what you already know, if you're an MBTI person, dominant. auxiliary, tertiary, inferior. Strength 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this is the partial version. But again, it's a lot for people to take in. But I'll direct attention to these names up there. Oh, they're going to pop up. Okay, so in your wheelhouse, unsung allies, B-side, and disdained. Right. Again, this column, in your wheelhouse. These functions are in your wheelhouse. Or rather, when you do activities that draw on these two functions, you can say that you are in these, that those activities are in your wheelhouse. These are unsung allies. Unsung allies. They can be developed, just not preferred. Preferred functions are in green. B-side. B-side. The B-side of the personality. I'll give you a bit more depth later. And again, the weakest two, on average, this disdained, especially in intertype relations. So that's the overview in terms of columns. Rows, default. So this is for an introverting type. The introverting types defaults to introverting. And situational extroverting. I will build on that in a moment. And the clubs are split between, so you're strong at all NT functions. If you're introverting, you're mainly, your thinking and your intuiting is going to be flavored by subjectivity and therefore is going to be labeled as introverting. It's subjectifying. Now, whilst in that mode of subjectifying, there is a counter club, and that is, if you are introverting, any sensing and feeling that goes on will be colored by that subjectification, by the subjective factor, and therefore the sensing colored by the subjective factor will be introverting sensing and then introverting feeling. So subjective, because you're in a state of subjectivity, a state of introversion. Look how the this is the furthest away. It is the counter club, and it is the and it is situational. It's furthest away from these two. Now, but the data does show, I mean, like the TI would show that these two are strong, but the actual data shows that this and this are strongest. Why would that be? Because that is valued more than NI, but NI is strong. Dario now has sort of like confirmed that the types, I've been saying it for a while, about 2015. What do I call this type? TINX. This is strong. The data is there, and I'll go over that data. So I'm going to go back to this after I've explained and read through, and I'm going to read through all of the stuff on Vertness. Right. So here we go. So this is, would it help if I put that on screen so that you can see it, that little image? It might help. You can sort of hold that in your mind. I've got a cunning plan. If I hold it here, right, so I'm gonna, we're talking about here. We're talking about the this top row, the default row, and on the left is for an extrovert. So for an extroverting type. So this name has changed multiple times. So in earlier versions, I called this consciousness. Vanderhook called it consciousness. Then cognizance, and it was almost like field of cognizance. But I realized that FI is more than just being cognizant of FI. It's about how it operates in the individual. In some folks, there might not be much FI to be cognizant of, EXTPs. Also, FE is more than paying attention to someone else's feeling state. Look at what Enneagram 2s do. You know, it's like actually like and changing other people's emotions, changing other people's feelings. A lot of charisma involved, different kinds of charisma, but you know what I mean. So I had this as, then I had it default, and then I had it as a little bit metaphorical, default realm of operation, which is a little bit like Robert McKee about a gap between the subjective realm and the objective realm. Don't like the word objective because it's got three meanings. Impartial, really, really, really true, like proper formal logic, and then empirical. But let's just go with empirical. So the default operating mode in the extrovert, although this is an introvert, so I'll put that down. Although you could turn it upside down and read it that way. The default operating mode in the extrovert is extroverting, i.e. empiricalizing, externalizing. And again here, externospectrum. It was originally externospectrum, but it's externospectrum. You're turning your attention. So here, default, as in default to, i.e. prefers. One's experience of default mode is more nuanced and practiced than one's situational mode. For extroverting types, the default operating mode is, you guessed it, extroverting. This means the type defaults to extroverting, i.e. directing attention outwards towards action in the world and empirical data, such as immediate sensory instinctual data, social customs, morality, body language, especially facial expressions and tone of voice, signifying feelings, FE. Well, that's FE. Then facts, numbers, practical application, TE. Also, Dario was saying measuring and constructing for progress. The world as possibilities. Connections, because I've got here like data. Well, in that the possibilities, like the NP can say, oh, we could do this, and it's like you can like see it. It's like it's discussable. It's not like an NI thing of, well, I think it's going to happen. Oh, do you? Where's your evidence? Right. How much money have you made on gambling? Try to monetize the NI. You NTJs are supposed to be good at business. Right. The world as possibilities, connections between ideas, stroke situations that can be articulated, debated, because there's like the links are there. There's certain data there in the patterns are there. It's sort of like there to be interpreted. There's something there to comment on that it's debatable how well the pattern fits. Right. Sensory instinctual. Instinctum. So disgust, sexual attraction, excitement. So if you see something that's literally disgusting, I won't give you the mental image, but and it's like you see it and go, ugh, you have an immediate reaction to it. That is bound up with the sensor. And so you've got sexual attraction. Again, it's immediately bound up and colored. Different people looking at the same person have a different reaction. That's not FE, that's not FI. Arguably, you could say FI, but no. I mean, it's part of the instinct thing. Disgust, sexual attraction, excitement, fear of spiders, snakes. Atavistic fear? Possibly. Spiders, snakes shows the sensory is bound up with the emotional reactions and again, an impulse to habit. So this is the guardians. They are an instincting, they are concrete. The concrete types are instincting. Or, so impulse to habit, from Vanderhoop, or impactful action. Right, think about Kersey's artisans. They are more than just sensory acuity it's more than just being observant and having a good ear. It's more than just that to extroverted instinct, because that's what you would get to if you were to deduce it from, well, I know what the 5 senses are. There's a few more than that, but they're minor senses like balance and like a sense of motion in the body and where everything is. But your main sense is your VACOG, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, gustatory, or rather gustatory. Right, it's more than just that and like going towards the input. I mean, it's more than that, but that's what you'll get to if you're reducing it. Instincts is involved. So look at artisans. So on a whole type level, we notice this. Impactful action. Again, it's motivation, it's the instinct. Freedom. As Jeff said, it can be about power, but it's always about freedom. It is like an ESFP. Seek stimulation, are audacious and adaptable. It's part of the instinct, part of the temperament. See chapter 2 of Van der Hoop's Conscious Orientation. It's got a chapter on instinct. Limbic system reacts to sensory input before it reaches the neocortices, the sphere of feeling and thought. It's not neocortex, there's two of them, cortices. And latter includes perception and recognition, yeah, within thought. This is our evolutionary heritage. Moving on. And then BV, subjectify and elaborate. Because the way Dario wrote it, you know, I just sort of like polished it up a bit. You know, arguably I'm like, but like he's got it in there as like, you know, he's saying this is in the section about an overall preference for introvert. He actually put the ing on there, introverting and extroverting. Subjectifying and elaborating on Dario Nardi and 8 keys of self-belief. So subjectifying is like my subjective factor coming through. Extroverts are comfortable doing many extroverted activities. Jungian cognitive functioning, slot 1, best. Actually, I'll do it on here. What we got here? Slot 1, best. 5, well enough. How about 3? 3, well. 5, well enough. 7, gets by with development in time. Right. You got an extroversion. Oh yes, because this is the extrovert. With this concept, I denote a manifest relatedness of subject to object in the sense of a positive movement of subjective interest towards the object. So we can say that really it's towards the stimulus, Carl, not just the object. So they're interested in the things that are in the world, the actual stimuli of the world, an action in the world. The interest is outside of themselves. One should speak of active extroversion when deliberately willed, and of a passive extroversion when the object compels it, i.e. attracts the interest of the subject of its own accord, even against the latter's intention. Like hearing a good bit of music, maybe. Should the state of extroversion become habitual, the extroverted type appears. I also thought recently that sort of like watching a movie and getting completely immersed in it, you're sort of in an extroverting state. Whereas if you are in a novel and you sort of like, you've got to build up a lot from the description, there's more of a subjective factor involved there. Right, so a bit more. So now let's compare the default mode of operation in the introvert. I've already read that bit. Right, so this is going to be more relevant. Oh, I'll put this on there. So, not what I said about me. So, default as in defaults to how it prefers. One's experience of default mode is more nuanced and practice than one situational mode. Yeah. We know this now, though. For introverting types, the default operating mode is, you guessed it, introverting. One can introvert without an external stimulus, e.g. whilst reflecting. And one can even introvert, i.e. subjectify, an outside stimulus by placing more attention on the subjective reaction to the stimulus rather than the empirical aspect of it. And then the Dario Nardi thing before. Now this is where I've added a bit to this to like clean it up a bit, make it a bit more understandable. Can't help myself, it's the subjective factor. Viewing on introverting, we call it introversion. but it's a verb. Your verb is an active state. Interest does not move towards the object, but recedes towards the subject. More of an inner focus. Introverting, i.e. the state of introversion, means the subject, person, has more interest in its subjective experience than in the object or external stimulus. E.g., sound is not an object, but it can hold one's attention outside of oneself. So that might be an example of passive extroversion. Everyone whose attitude is introverted thinks, feels, and acts in a way that clearly demonstrates that the subject is the chief factor of motivation, while the object, or stimulus such as sound, my interpolation, at most receives only a secondary value. So it's the reaction to it. Introversion is active when the subject wills a certain seclusion in the face of the object, pushing out the outside stimulus to sort of like go into their own state, own feelings, own thoughts, own instincts, in their own intuitive. It is passive when the subject is unable to restore and maintain interest in the object or stimulus, and interest metaphorically turns away from the object back to the subject. So maybe an introvert is trying to pay attention to a conversation, but they find it boring as hell, and they go back into themselves, and they sort of subjectify. Turns away from the object back to the subject person. When introversion, their own person. When introversion is habitual, one speaks the introverted type. So there's a little bit of a diagnostic thing now. Jung believed in introverting and extroverting, but he didn't actually believe that there is an introvert or an extrovert. He sort of believed it, well, this person habitually introverts, therefore I'm going to label them as an introvert. So what did I put here? Right, here. Everyone whose attitude is introverted thinks, feels, and acts in a way that clearly demonstrates the subject. So what that goes towards there is that the introvert is pretty good at all the introverting functions because he's got there thinks, feels, and acts. So telling, because it means actions of and feelings in the TI DOM, will often be subjective introverting. So it's like, you got a TI DOM, and it says there, they think, feel, and act in a way that is subjective. So if they're acting in a way that is subjective when they think, they feel, and they act, all in a subjective way, then that means they're using the subjective functions, the introverting functions. Jung on TI, here's a little bit of extra stuff on introverting. This is important. Thus, the introverted rational types, TI and FI DOMs, unquestionably have a reasoning judgment, only it is a judgment whose leading note is subjective. The laws of logic are not necessarily deflected, since its one-sidedness lies in the premise. The premise is the predominance of the subjective factor, existing beneath every conclusion and colouring every judgment. So a TI statement can be logically valid, internally consistent, but still unsound. This is what a lot of Socionics Model A people fail to understand, because they will not admit that introverting functions are subjective. They believe in this asinine internal-external dichotomy where thinking and sensing are external and therefore objective. Well, I beg to differ. There is room for interpretation with sensing and thinking. Right. So, for example, Wojtek and I have a different understanding of the word empathy. But if thought was external, then my understanding of the word and his understanding of the word would be identical. There is a subjective factor. Our definitions of empathy are not as far apart as banana and truck. So there is some commonality there, and we could sort of put that under the sort of the empirical factor, and then there's the subjective factor that comes in. And the more abstract that something is, the more sort of difference in worldview, but then you can also have other differences. Like, I said the word dog. The dog that you imagine, well, what kind of dog? Again, so it doesn't transfer across. Anyway, I'm digressing. Are we critiquing socionics? So that is the default mode of operation. The default mode of operation for me, for the introverting type, is to introvert, to subjectify. That is the default. Now we're going to go on the situational. Okay, when does the situation, you'll find out when the introvert goes into an extroverting state and when the extrovert goes into an introverting state. That is the next slide. Situational mode. So you'll find out here. Right then. So, for the extrovert, situational operating mode in the extrovert is introverting, i.e. subjectifying, internalizing. Introspecting. Extroverts do introspect. SI is not as internal as the other introverting functions because it's still sensing stuff. However, certain subfunctions are, e.g. SI imaginative, sensory imagination. Guardians love sensory description in novels. Like a whole page on describing an item of clothing. It's very evocative for them. SI harmonizing, internal bodily harmony. Again, internal. For extroverting types, the situational operating mode is introverting. So let's have some examples. Compared to the personal row in Victor Galenka's Model G, which is this one. Again, these are all extroverting functions, but again, it's a little bit tricky explaining that here. Let's see if you can see this. Compared to the personal row in Victor Galenka's Model G, the situational row is less specific. It can include the personal, e.g. the NETX, that's ENTP, resemble Wilma Twinley in this play, this real thing with these lines on the back. The Itachi magic wand, muscle massager, puts the R in Itachi. There we go. Those are lines. Comedy stage play. Right then. Right. I mean, right. Here we go. Wilma Twinley in my stage play, Woman Arena, on Lulu.com, is introverted. And if you go there, you can read reviews. Is on introverted. Is on. And if you go to my about, and there's a flow link, you can download the first act for free. It's about 30 pages. Right. Is introverting. So Wilma Twinley is introverting as she prays and reflects. Insularly, but that's beside the point. Yeah, because it's like the theatrical convention and like talking out loud to the audience, but though she's like just really thinking out loud, sort of talking to herself. But that's beside the point. Introverting as she prays and reflects. And it is whilst she reflects that she accesses her weakest function, FI. However, so it's about how her internal feelings, because she's in dilemma. However, the situational includes something the personal does not. The idea, in fact, I'm just going to move my microphone closer to me, just to see have some better sound. One moment. This technical delay. Oh, I'll put this box over here. And that's going to kill the mic. There we go. That should be a little bit better. So state of introvert. However, so the situational includes something the personal does not. And this is important. And this is why it's in bold. I'm going to go maximum on this. Right. Key idea. The situational includes something the personal does not. The situational includes the idea that certain situations draw on certain faculties. Certain situations draw on certain functions which are of opposite Vertness to the type, e.g., situations which draw on the introverting functions of the extrovert. such as when the extrovert pauses to ponder, TI, considers, considers how something might develop, or have a moment of inspiration from within, NI. Run a present experience against their storehouse of past experiences as a way to interpret it. So that's probably introverting that's deliberately willed. So it might be like they might hear something. That reminds me of, this feels familiar. There's again subjective, the memory in there. Memory is a part of the subjective factor. You might hear a piece of music and you have a subjective reaction to it because you might have had a good time when you first heard it. Say no more. Or pause to search their own feelings, such as judging what move to make in the romantic sphere, or in a dilemma where different values are at loggerheads, e.g. selling out versus artistic integrity. And this is assessed by the person as what feels right to it personally. So these are examples of an extrovert that is introverted. Wrinkle. If a person thinks about its dilemma, TI will, by definition, also be involved. Subjective thinker. And then CBT. That's important. CBT shows how feeling and thinking influence each other. I won't show the diagram. It would be a digression, but it's the ABC model. The way you think about someone worrying, and say someone's worrying, and then they talk to their friend, and their friend asks them to look at it in a different way. They reframe it for them, and they think about it in a different way, then their feelings change. Or someone's feelings might lead somebody to think in a certain direction. So thinkings affect feelings, and feelings affect thinking. It's thinking and feeling are not direct opposites. For something to be a direct opposite, it has to be mutually exclusive. So, for example, if you are immersing yourself in the present context, focusing on the now, and what is happening in this particular situation, then you are not thinking transcontextually. Those two things are mutually exclusive. A direct opposite is mutually exclusive. For example, concrete speech versus abstract speech. Cannot be abstract and concrete at the same time. Can alternate. You cannot be directive and informing at the same time. You cannot be cooperative and utilitarian at the same time. These are mutually exclusive and therefore direct opposites. Thinking and feeling are not direct opposites. This is from Vanderhoop, this insight. It is the impersonal objectivity to which thinking aims that is the opposite of personal sentiments, of that aspect. So it's only in certain situations that thinking and feeling are opposites. But the data would show that TI DOMs, for instance, usually have FE in their lower half of their scores for 8 functions. Jungian introversion. We've gone through that. I'm not doing repetition. Now for the when the introvert extroverts. When does the introvert extrovert? The situational operating mode in the introvert is extroverting, i.e. empiricalizing, externalizing. I say empiricalizing in that they're going towards the empirical properties of the sensory input. And this is usually going to be that said, smell can be very subjective because the olfactory bulb, olfactory, and the old that's part of the brain is just very near the amygdala, which stores emotional memories. Now, John B. Arden, I believe, he sort of hypothesized about the utility of emotions in allowing more sophisticated behavioral responses in mammals than you could get with an animal that's just pure instinct, like a snake. There's just that sort of reflex. Whereas there's emotions involved in the reaction, Like you see more ability to learn from experience. Because if it's instinctive, then a snake, for example, cannot learn from experience. But if you have memories associated with emotion, then that can be stored in the mammal, being more sophisticated cerebrally, although mentally, cognitively, brain-wise, is more. So he came up with a theory as to why emotions developed in animals and the utility of that versus pure reflex. Right. So compared to the personal row in Victor Galenka's Model G, I mean, as I say, Galenka is that there's no, is that it's not a long O, because a long O actually is a diphthong. O, it's O and U at the same time. And so that's O, Galenka. That would be the Russian one, but the Ukrainian might be slightly different. Victor Galenka's Model G. The situational row is less specific. It can include the personal, e.g. the TNX resembler. Again, different text. Okay, here we go. The TNX resembler becoming expressive when talking on its territory, might be now, e.g. about an interest, or more open with feelings when talking to someone it has a good relationship with. So again, situational extroverting. Ben, I think you're an INTP. Well, that's because situationally I'm extroverting now. However, situational includes something the personal does not. The idea that certain situations draw on certain faculties, mental power, Jungian cognitive functions, which are of opposite Vertness or Vertness to the type, e.g., situations which draw on the extroverting functions of the introvert. So right now I want to explain this, and it's like a bit of TI with FE. I want sort of like, what are people going to think of this? So this is a good example by Van der Hoop. If it was a bad one, I wouldn't have put it in. But let's see if I'm right. This is the guy, J.H. Van der Hoop. For example, the psychiatrist, Van der Hoop, a TI-next resembler trained by... Yeah, he's like he thought it was INTP. Well, you know what he called himself? By translation, an introvert of thinking type with subsidiary intuition. So here, so it's like there's some debate over what we know about Carl Jung. Like he thinks that he was originally like he didn't use the terminology, but introvert, INTP, and it may have changed. But basically, an introverting type and an introverting type, INXX. But Van der Hoop, INTP. He clarifies Jung's thinking, and he brings his own subjective factor and takes Jung's sensation and says, "Yeah, I don't think it was right. I think instinct." Anyway, Van der Hoop wrote in Conscious Orientation, page 24, about taking up horse riding again after a long interval. He stated that in order not to be thrown by the horse, his attention was, I'm not going to do a Dutch accent, and maybe I'll try. Riveted, I'm not going to do it. Riveted on the totality of my sense experience and my reactions to it. They're really extroverting his really extroverting there. His attention is outwards, riveted on the totality of my sense experience and my reactions to it. So as not to be thrown by the horse. So it was in a state of SE, extroverted instinct, and because of the situation, situational. And then there's just a bit here. Again, we've gone over extroverting before. In practice, a real person is best described as dynamically alternating between degrees of extroverting and introverting, and moving along a Vertness spectrum. This can be a moment-by-moment change. Also, a real person resembles rather than is a type, hence PINX resembler. In my opinion, right, this is something to look out for. Even though a type resembler can do atypical things, they tend to do it in the typical way, e.g. a by-the-book SITX-like artist. Example from real life, this is Imogen's, been on the channel, ISFP, her brother, ISCJ, artist, but by the book. Whereas Imogen was a technical artist, ISFP, less by the book. So that is the concept of verting for this. So the introvert, default mode of operation is default MO Modus operandi is introverting, subjectifying, and situationally extroverting. So now we're ready to move on to the big model. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to show something about the club functions. So NF functions, NE, NI, FE, FI. I'll go through all of the NFs to sort of show, okay, ENFP, NF functions, right? ENFJ, NF functions, NF functions, NF functions. Okay, flogging a horse. Now, what I want to show here is the functions, the valued functions are opposite between ENFJ here. You see FE, NI, SETI, and in ENFP, the opposite. Because I just said those ones there, FE, NI, SETI, they're unvalued in ENFJ. But you can see how they're still quite strong. So you have that comparison there, that they're within the same club because they're an NF. This is why all NFs are pretty good at FI. Like they've all got a bit of 4 in them. NFs. Even ENFJ. Even an ENFJ that resembles a trifix of 2, 6, 9 can have some FI in them. A bit of 4 in them. So now let's explain the clubs. Right, and then I went over my scores. So which type am I going to look at? Well, let's look at INTP, which means going up here. Oh yes, something to show. These are all the IN types. All these IN types, so INXX, look where they have NI. Well, the INFJ and the INTJ are going to have NI in position 1. And INFP and INTP are going to have NI in position 3. It's still within the default club. The default club. So here is my thinking, that you're going to be, and remember, this is what the data shows. Let's go back to INTP. Let's go to INTJ, because there are loads of INTJs. A lot of them watch the... So, INTJs are pretty darn good at finding errors in arguments. So they tend to use TI negatively. They are the critic, or have a tendency to be like that. So now we've got the intersection of 2 ideas. Now, for the abstract types, I won't say the intuitive types, because some people might think, well, an intuitive type is an NE DOM or an NI DOM. And that say INTP would be a thinking type. Okay, but if we say abstract types, then we know what we mean. It's all the types with an intuiting preference. All the abstract types. So, for them, the clubs, so the clubs are SF, ST, NF, NT. They match the Kersey temperament. So, let's intersect 2 ideas. INTP is rational in the Kersey sense. It's also rational in the Jungian sense because it leads with a rational function. But INTP is an NT. So their temperament is that of the NT. So we've got the temperament, the NT part, and then that intersects with the introverting part. So you've got these 4 club functions, and then you've got the introverting. So if those 2 things, when those 2 things intersect, then they're going to be using the introverting, the subjective functions within the NT functions. And the NT functions correlate to the Kersey temperament of the abstract utilitarian, the rational, or the Promethean. So that's a sort of a TI reason for why this function is strong. But again, it's also backed up by the data. Also the NE, voice in the back of the head. They can look at various options, INTJ. It's just that they ignore it. This is called the ignoring function in Model A. So let's read about the club functions, and then we'll read about the club functions, and then these lot, and then this one at the bottom. So right, I think we could do it like this. Right, so you got the club divided between valued and unvalued. And so for this type, the two valued ones are TI and NE, and then we've got NI and TE. Again, they're still part of the temperament, the NT temperament. And so I'll give a little bit of evidence for you as for why. So Kersey's got 4 roles, and the roles correlate to function pairs. So Kersey has every NT good at coordinating and constructing. So for INTP, they're best at constructing, but they're best at constructing in a reserved way. So that's theories, this. Theories, in ENTP, constructing like something, again, more extroverting, like get that invention out there, something more physical, externalized. And secondarily, they can do coordinating, coordinate these events and line people up. You know, Dario and Victor don't just appear, and what stuff happens behind the scenes. So coordinating. And so you've got those two halves of the intellect. And that coordinating, well, if you're coordinating actions, getting the sequence of actions right in order to term a long-term strategic objective, then I think you're using NI, at least that part of it that we can label as intuition of development and practical thinking. Again, so it sort of correlates. And I can prove that I can give some examples of INTPs being not bad at TE. How many INTPs are scientists? I mean, I myself did a biology degree in England. That means 3 years only biology. So that might be like a master's degree in the United States. That's up for debate. So also think of the INTPs that work in computing. Now, I would say that if you're learning a certain code, a certain language, well, there's a certain structure to it that's sort of outside, external to you, and the way to do it. And so Wojciech on my channel, he knows quite a bit about that area. And again, an INTP and TE. Another thing that we can associate TE with, business. So Victor teaches that INTP is really weak at TE, but he runs a typology business in Ukraine. That's not going to be easy. Linda Behrens, typology business, INTP. David Mark Kersey ran a typology business. They're able to have investments that paid off. So, did some TE there. It's just that we have to learn to have the energy for the TE. I'll get onto that later. So, this is the wheelhouse function. So, this is going to be these two beauties in INTP. And just to saying it that, valued. So, preference leads to practice, practice leads to ability. So, there is a strong correlation between a Jungian type's 2 wheelhouse functions, i.e. slots 1 and 2, i.e. in one's wheelhouse, and the top 2 functions best suited to help enact the type's Kersey predisposed role. E.g., SIFX, that's ISFJ, the accommodator guardian. ISF is highly concerned with attending to the physical needs. So I would say that's the harmonizing subfunction of SI, comfort sensing of other people. FE, directed towards other people, especially when the other person is physically unwell. So that correlates to the predisposed role of the provider protector. physical well-being. In the KTM, Cozy Temperament Model, the accommodated guardian, which corresponds to SIFX, is predisposed to the role of provider protector, e.g. a medical doctor, physiotherapist, nurse, carer. I mean, Jack's wife-to-be, physiotherapist, should probably be, like, she's SEI in socionics, she's probably accommodate a guardian, SFJ in Kersey as well, is predisposed to the role of provider protector. Doesn't mean that's what they can only do, because, you know, it's an important role, but you can see there the variance there: medical doctor, physiotherapist, nurse, carer. Many an ISFJ resembler has a 2 in its Enneagram trifix. Wheelhouse functions match the top 2 in Jung, dominant and auxiliary, MBTI, Socionics, the ego row, Socionics Model A, and Dario Nardi's cognitive processes assessment. So that is consistent. This is not me being wacky by saying that the top 2 functions in the INTP are TI and NE. Right. Let's go on with the unsung allies. There's a lot of slot 4 stuff in there. I'll get back to that. So club functions. So clubs and club functions. SF. So SFs are strong at SE, SI, FE, FI. Now, depending on the SF, if it's an SFJ, SI and FE will be valued, and SE and FI will be unvalued. If it's an SFP, then SE and FI will be valued, and SI and FE will be unvalued but strong. Jeff went into the role of a provider when he was a single father to his ESTP son. So he said that when he was in that, when he was sort of fulfilling that role, he was thinking about a lot of logistical things. So there's an example of an ESFP resembler, a collaborator artisan enacting a logistical role. And it's actually quite hard for INTP females to sort of enact that sort of maternal, it's sort of like it drains them. Right. SF. I mean, Linda Bones has written that hardest type to be for a female to be is INTP. And I thought, well, wait a minute. ENTJ is furthest away from, say, ISFJ. But then I thought, hang on a minute. They're ENTJs. They're tough as nails. But INTP, not so much. So, yeah. And again, ST. SESITETI. They're the ST functions. S and F. The NF functions. NE, NI, FE, FI. The NT functions. NE, NI, TE, TI. Right, we've got that. These are the NT club functions. These are the default, slot 1, slot 3. Each type's predisposed Kersey role variant, social roles, correlates to the first 3 functions in its model V. E.g., ENTP has 1, ideas. Socionics tends to call it intuition of ideas. Let's just say that ENTPs are good at ideas. They're good at generating ideas. Subjective thinking. So sort of like their own idiosyncratic thinking. Practical thinking. And this is something that, this is the fish's water. This is like they'll go, crap, but they get stuff done. And then those 3 functions which the role of inventor would draw most on. Very useful for if you wanted to invent stuff, and it's like, so it's like, say you're programming a robot to invent stuff, and it's like you only had 8 functions, and it's like, oh, I need to put some TE in there, or I've got to put some NE in there for ideas, and I've got to put some TI in there. So those 3 functions correlate, that would draw most on. And another example, thus ENTP has the most potential of the 16 types to excel as an inventor. This is something I really impress upon people, and that is not to confuse the type in Kersey with the role variant, because when people do, they assume that Kurz is just talking about 16 stereotypes when they look at his roles. Again, you can have atypical role enactment in a typical way. So an ISTJ can enact the role of composer, but they'll do it in an ISTJ by the book way. So it's like classical, like good form, like beautiful technical artwork. Thus, we'll draw most on. Thus, the interview. Second example, role of counselor. The counselor role, as in, not counselor, as in, you know what I mean? It's like therapist, almost like therapist. Role of counselor draws on NI, FE, and FI, the big three of NI effects, INFJ, IEI, contender, idealist. The strength of slots 3 and 4 is consistent with Nardi's research referred to in the Magic Diamond, page 424. I'm going to quote a bit. I'm going to run the risk of annoying Dario. But I'm going to say, buy his book, 8 Paths to Self-Coaching. I'm just going to, there's a key bit that I'm going to read out. A key bit. Right, so here we go. For example, if the highest scores are extroverted feeling with support processes, introverted intuiting, and extroverted intuiting, he's talking about an ENFJ. Then the bottom half is usually home to low scorers, sensing and thinking. So basically, the counter club, the ST club. Right, hopefully Dario doesn't kill me for quoting him. So, again, 4D functions, but slot 1 is, right, yeah, it's stronger. In Model V, slot 1 is stronger than slot 3. But in Model A, Model 8 is. They have them as both 4-dimensional. So, now I can go back to this. And again, the strength of that position. So credit for the first person that mentioned the strength of that position. Well, say that graphic, who was the first person to show the strength of that function? Well, it was Van der Hoop. Strength of NI in INTP. Strength of FE in ENFP. He even talks about the role of, and like, bring along social change. I'm like, this is like the champion of a cause, the advocator. We're back here. Right, and we're going to go here. Unsung allies, growth. So these are the functions that are part of the club that are not valued. So these are NI and TE in INTP. Fish is water. INTP fish does not know it's wet with NI. We think it's TI. When we're thinking and pondering something, and we know to sort of think in a certain direction that it's the right way to go in, that's the NI. It's leading us to think in a certain direction. Once it becomes conscious, I think that's more TI. Credit to Victor Galenka. 23. There's 23 appearances on this channel, by the way, for emphasizing the importance of slot 3. The first person to write about the strength of slot 3 was Dutch psychiatrist J.H. van der Hoop, taught by Jung. See Conscious Orientation, 1939. Or if you're German, see, I ain't. You see, because see that one. What's that? Bewussten sein Typen und her Beseitigung zur Psychopathology, which literally translates to consciousness types and their relationship to psychopathology. And that's Wojciech's translation. Anyway, I murdered that, but it gives some amusement. Here we go. The data. On page 220 of Dario Nardi's Magic Diamond, it is stated that slot 4 was the 4th highest score in 33% of the CPA assessments taken. See keyscognition.com. I know folks who have taken it more than once. So position 4 would be TE. TE in INTP. So for the 4th highest score in, I know folks who have taken it more than once. Sometimes slot 4 was the 3rd highest scorer, i.e. ahead of slot 3. Key. key finding, 96% of subjects had their top 3 functions from the same club. So these are the NT functions. So someone's INTP, there's a 96% chance that their third highest was like one of these. Or if it was ENTP, one of, again, it would be T and I, but say it's ESFP, the third one might be FE or SI. There might be some, let's see. Right, minute on slot 4. I'll bang on about slot 4 a lot because of this. I have a little bit of a theoretical difference with Victor about this. It's a nuanced point that some might find tricky to understand. But you know, I will hope for the best. Note on slot 4. So this is going to be TE and INTP. That's it. That's the perfect place. Right, you can see that. Note on slot 4. TI-NEX resembler working in science is going to be highly aware TE. Data, scientific method, empiricism, and Karl-Popper approach. Falsification, the aim to eliminate subjective factor. So a Karl-Popper approach is a theory. You try and disprove the theory, and it's not accepted, it's not proven, it's undisproven. Right. So now we're going to get down to here. This is a complex bit, and it's a bit small, but I'm going to try my best with this. So the situational club functions. So I would say, so what I'm sort of saying is, INTP, these 4 club NT functions are strong. When they're heavily introverting, their thinking is introverting and their intuiting is introverting. So they're mainly going to be using TI and NI. This is the situational. Now they're all going to go in between, but it's like, where is the default? Where's the situational? So say an INTP is reading a theory, say they're reading Van der Hoop, and they've got their subjective factor, like sort of what they think and what Van der Hoop's written, and they're making connections between maybe Van der Hoop and what somebody else has written. Say Van der Hoop and Kersey. So these are like 2 ideas which are sort of like outside of my head, and I'm comparing them. And so I would say when I'm comparing, say, Van der Hoop and the Kersey role, that's more any, because it's like I'm comparing their thinking, and then it might go more towards what I think. It might go more towards TI, and maybe if I have a realization, and I sort of feed in that. So here's a claim. An extreme introvert is likely to show, this is a bit of TI, so but it makes sense. An extreme introvert is likely to show better use of counter club default functions, slot 5 and 7. So I'm saying an extreme introvert is likely to show better use of these functions than a moderate introvert, because they're in this state of introverting a lot. So any sensing and feeling that they have will be subjective, will be introverting. An extreme introvert is likely to show better use of counter club default. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a different mode so you can see this a bit easier. I'm going to, I'll sort of take myself off the screen for a moment whilst I read this through. Right, let's make it a bit bigger. I'll be back. So an extreme introvert is likely to show better use of counter club default functions, slots 5 and 7. So these ones down here, than a moderate introvert. So just think mentally, top right, than a moderate introvert. Conversely, a moderate introvert is likely to show better use of club situational functions, which for an introvert are extroverted, than an extreme introvert. That makes sense, doesn't it? That a moderate introvert is likely to use better extroverting, that their quality of extroverting is likely to be better than the extreme introvert that extroverts less. Re-yellow. So now we go on to the wrinkle. Right, this is the bit where I bang it. So this is TE in, so it's like that position. Can you see that there? So this would be TE. This is position 4. This is TE and INTP. This oblong's red text is slot 4. I have adapted the idea from Dr. Victor Galenka's Model G that slot 4, i.e. slot 8 in Model G, is high in information but low in energy. I frame this as slot 4 being high in potential ability but low in internal motivation. Key point, internal motivation. But like I said, say you got an INTP in the job of a scientist, you might have to do a lot of TE stuff. I mean, a lot of TE stuff has to be done. NB, external motivation can work wonders. E.g., someone could give you $1,000 worth of motivation to mow a lawn. But that $1,000 of motivation has less relevance to the average person tasked with scoring 150 on an IQ test to get the cash. In that case, it comes down to ability more than motivation. Ability is the ally of willpower, to coin the phrase. Wrinkle. SF and ST clubs cross Kersey IQs. Now, when it's NT and NF, they correspond to the Kersey temperaments of rational and idealist. But the SF and ST clubs cut across Kersey IQs. So he's got these 4. These are the Kersey equivalent of functions. You've got there logistical. You've got logistical safekeeping. You've got tactical manipulating. You've got diplomatic enabling, and then you've got strategic building. And again here, SF and ST clubs cut across Kersey's IQs, e.g. SF's cut across, so logistical providing and tactical entertaining, because SFJs do the logistical providing and the SFPs do tactical entertaining. But Jeff, an SFP, did the logistical providing when he was a single father to his son. Right, but let's look at that. I found a connection. Both are still for other people. So it's like you've heard the phrase entertaining guests. So provide for others. Pride for the physicals and well-being of others. That's for others. And entertaining others. Again, it's still for others. So SF. It's sort of like that club's called Socials in Socionics. I'm just going to pop over here, and then before I go back, why can't I get over there? Oh, because I'm on the wrong screen. Right. Oh, right. And ST is cut across logistical monitoring, supervising and inspecting. So ESTJ is good at supervising, ISTJ is good at inspecting, and STP tactical expediting, promoting and crafting. Looking for complementarity, we can see how the mechanic, technician, crafter role needs to inspect. The mechanic needs to inspect. However, link between supervising procedures and promoting schemes harder to see, in quotation marks. Right, so what have we got here? So this is a comment on adapted from Galenka rather than adopted. That's because I've slightly changed it. Because my view of this slot is very different from Dr. G's when it comes to its efficacy. So he thinks TE is useless in INTP. I beg to differ. I believe the INTP needs to pull their finger out because they can get good at TE. My key assertion is that the higher information, and also the data shows it. My key assertion is that the higher information one has about a function-related task, because he always said that TE is high in information but low in energy. But my point is, when you've got high information, there's a knock-on effect, and I will explain. My key assertion is that the higher information one has about a function-related task, the more understanding and know-how one has. This leads to higher task efficiency, i.e. a low effort to effect ratio. So the higher the information you have, the lower the effort to effect ratio, more know-how. For something the type resembler is not overly keen about doing. So this is what I'm sort of saying here is INTPs are intellectually capable of doing TE stuff. But it's boring. For comparison, slot 8, averse, has low information, which I correlate to low potential ability and low internal motivation. So therefore, averse, the Achilles heel, the place of least resistance, the vulnerable function is weaker than the control. Important dynamic to grasp. Effort required to complete a task versus motivation to spend effort on it. Compare these tasks. Task A is easier, but very boring. Task B, which is much harder, but not as boring. So we've got two dynamics there. Between two factors. Certain types and then something else. Certain types are more self-disciplined than others, e.g. ESTJ more willing to do unvalued TI tasks than ESFP is to do unvalued SI tasks because more self-disciplined. And then Dario Nardi, eight-time guest. Yes, eight-time guest. 23-time guest for Victor. On the page in Appendix D of the Magic Diamond, 2020, wrote something which boiled down thus. ST, SF, NF, NT function pairs are highly relevant. This means club functions are highly relevant. By the way, he wrote better to state ISTJ's SITX and SRTE. I've used SITX since 2015. Right, so I'm going to go back to putting me there. Let's see any more. Now we're going to get to Hot 4 B-side. Did I mention anything else about Fish's Water? Yeah, the backseat driver, like, I've done the Fish's Water, backseat driver. It's like me when I bring up the data shows. It's like it's like the other side of TI. It's like it's subjective to. So the INTP spends a lot of its time in a sort of thinking state, and it's not just like subjectivity. It's like there's a part of them that's like, okay, I'm going to check this. I'm going to look at the data, especially if they're a 6. I'm going to look at the data, and it's just like a TE dom. They're going to also think for themselves rather than just be a prisoner of the facts. They wouldn't know how to interpret it. I'm going to use some TI. And so back to that metaphor, the backseat driver, it's like that little voice that's offering you advice. So it's like you can like ignore it, or sometimes they'll say, "I'm just going to, oh, no, that's a good idea. All right, then I'll go with that." The backseat driver, front seat driver, backseat driver, right? That's sort of like how it's experienced. So it's like FE Dom will have some like FI considerations that they put to one side because the FE things are more important. But it's going to get to a certain point where, you know, it's like, hey, I need my needs to be met. Or the FI Dom is going to have some FE considerations as well. This is why INTJ and IST, especially INTJ, is weaker at FE than INFP. Right. Right. Slots 5 and 6. I am going to zoom in. So slots 5 and 6 are value. They are SI and FE, the lower two in your 4-function stack. So 5 is tertiary, 6 is inferior. The functions in slot 5 and 6 are weaker than 1 to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The functions in slot 5 and 6 are weaker than 1 to 4, yet valued. Better use of these functions is respected in others. Then can be a turn on. See the video I did with Joyce when I asked her if she likes ESTP, and she got, you know, a little bit embarrassed. Like INFJs are hot for ESTPs. But that's how you can tell the difference between an INFJ and an INFP. The function in slot 6 and the function in slot 5 are respectively the dominant and auxiliary function of this type's dual. So ESFJ, FESI are respectively the dominant and auxiliary function of this type's dual. Complementary opposite. That's what dual means. INTP has inferior FE and tertiary SI, and its dual ESFJ has dominant FE and auxiliary SI. Idea imported from Socionics. Now, slot 6 and 5 can also be seen as a function map of the Jungian soul image. Look up anima, anima. So this is like Dario, even Dario has, I smudged it. Even Dario has talked about is in our ESFP. What have we got?
So that's like the function map. The other side, the B side of the personality. Metaphorically, there's an ESFJ inside of me, and that side develops. Can also be seen as a function map of the Jungian soul image. This is the other side, i.e. B side of the personality. Dario has mentioned is in an ESFP. Right. So, slot 5, dabbling tertiary. Oh yeah, I'm going to talk about that. So INTP, in a state of introverting, they're going to prefer TI and NI, and then go to SI and FI. Again, the situation will call upon it. But it's going to be within the default mode of operation, introverting, subjectifying. So, counter club. It's difficult to know how to do this. If I do all the green, and then I go back to the red. So I'll just try and remember that. Green, then red. Green, then red. Hopefully I don't forget. So I'm going to concentrate on slot 5. So that's going to be SI, dabbling tertiary. So I kept the second part of the, so I've got differentiated dominant, the most differentiated, the most nuanced function, showy auxiliary. Think of INTP showing off the TI. Dabbling tertiary and inferior. Suggestible inferior. INFJ is hot for SE, so are INTJs. So, slot 5, dabbling tertiary, has low endurance, hence the name, dabbling. The type has more short-lived, eyes bigger than its belly, motivation and ability for this function. Overplays its moderate hand. It can come across as someone having pretensions for the function in slot 5, i.e. the person is not as good at this function as it thinks it is, because the person does not fully commit to the function. Think of an ENTP. They don't fully commit to FE the way an FE DOM does. It only dabbles in it, unless there is a non-type factor to encourage its use, especially the requirements of someone's job. So, Victor Galenka's import, beneficiary shift by type to acting like its beneficiary, e.g. NIFX, that's INFJ, contender idealist, acting, INTP, accommodator, rational, ENTJ acting like ESTP, INFP acting like ISFJ, upon seeing physical suffering, NITX acting like INFP, authentic. We're going to sort of talk about their values. So now I'm going to have a talk about the other one, the counter club. And it is valued, but they spend more time in NE and TI. So I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to go back to the red ones. So do I need to, there's a small one again, I might need to just think this is, it's going to be here, it's going to be there, this one. So I'm going to go out again, make this slightly bigger, that one. Right, you want to go there? Dario Nardi's cognitive processes assessment found here. Keys to cognition.com. Right, it would be sharper if I used it would be sharp if I used the PDF. Let's see if I can get fancy. PDF. Right. Okay. What am I doing? I'm just going to zoom in. Just going to go over here. Can I full screen that? Can't really full screen it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to there. Oh, that was a bit of a digression. Okay, I'll read it out. Dario Nardi's cognitive process assessment, found there, showed the inferior function was almost always in the bottom half of the scores. Functions in slots 6 and 8 are opposite in Vertness from the default row. and a part of the counter club function. So these are why these are the two weakest. So again, in all IN types, SE is going to be in that bottom right corner. Yeah. Opposite Vertness from the default row. So it's like furthest away from it. Different Vertness, and the not default, the situational. So different club and different Vertness are part of the counter club functions. Their weakness is unsurprising. Think of suggestible inferior SE, extroverted instincting. That should be extroverting instincting. Tells in women NI dom resemblers. They tend to be attracted towards manly men. Tendency for those women to dress in a post-feminist way. Very diplomatic. See Blake 7 episode The Harvest of Kairos for NITX SEFX Servland Jarvik duality. She even says to him, "You really are an animal, aren't you?" And he says to her, and it's like, when was the last time you laughed or wept at the death of a friend, or lay with your naked back in the sun? When was the last time you felt like that kind of thing? So it's like really like you can see the instinct within and the feeling, very ESFP. And even as an artisan job, she said. Anyway, the duality. That episode might be on YouTube. Harvest of Kairos. Below is about Vanderhoop integrating inferior FE into himself. So this inferior FE, it depends on how developed it is, whether it's complexes with it, and it could be, it's like, if it's developed enough, once it's integrated, that's a good thing. So conscious orientation. J.S. Vanderhoop wrote a polarity, that is the counter club in Model V, can be integrated into the personality. And he was writing about FE because he wrote conventional moral evaluations. Can be integrated into personality, e.g. retining Vanderhoop's own type. But where there is a greater freedom in thought, we get a morality, conventional moral evaluations, founded on principles and reason. TI and the FE is integrated. And he actually says that you get a considerable development in the type when this happens. The type can change quite a bit. Capable of giving fresh insight into life and feeling. And then he talks about himself. The effect of polarity in me, because he said he was a polarized type. So he had that counter-nucleus pole. He wasn't just NT. He had the SF going on. The effect of polarity in me gives rise to an interesting feeling in its relation to instincts. So it's SF counter-nucleus, counter-club. But I lay more emphasis on the feeling life as a sphere to itself and the significance of morality. Now, he's going to develop those feeling functions because he was a psychiatrist and trained with Jung. Right, now we're getting on to this other column. Right, and I've got Kersey temperaments, artisan, SE wheelhouse. Right, and then Guardians, SI wheelhouse, idealist, NF rationality. So I'm going to go back to this other column, and that means I'm going to go back. Or should I stick there for the moment? Okay, I'll stick on this for the moment before then going back to me. No, I need to show you where position. Okay, I'll show you on here where position 8 is. So you see there, right here, right there. SE weakest function in INTP. Let's show some other weak ones. SI and ENFJ that overwork themselves. Not good memory of the. Again, TI and ENFPs. Need I say more? TE and INFJs. We can't be bothered. We do find TE stuff hard. Although with enough motivation, like Tamara. What we got here? SE and INFPs. FE and INTJs, SE and INTPs, SI and ENTJs overwork themselves, and definitely FI and ENTP. Right, so weakest function. So, no, we want this one, don't we? Oh, actually, we want this one. So, now I'm going to go back there, and I'm going to talk about, so something about that weakest function. There. So, the function in slot 8 is the least valued of the lot. I scored 1 out of 16 for SE, and I'm not ashamed of that, because to me the function is reckless. The function in slot 8 is the least valued of the lot. You can see how it's the opposite of NI. The function in slot 8 is the least valued of the lot. Opposite of NI in a certain way, because it's also opposite of any. The least valued of the lot. It is the Achilles heel of the psyche. The Achilles heel. I try to find the best metaphor. There's like averse, you don't like it, averse to it. It can be used in a binary fashion. So an ESTP can sort of like be sort of like stretch the truth, like be a bit of a promoter, a bit of a con artist, a bit of like tactical lying, but they can also be really annoyed by other people being hypocritical and things like that, and it's like they don't see their own hypocrisy. So it's like all or nothing. You can get a little bit of that overly trusting or not trusting at all. It's sort of like it can get, so that's like the binary aspect of that position, that slot. The least valued of the lot is the Achilles heel of the psyche. Weakest function, the most disliked in others. INFPs do not like ESTPs, and ESTPs do not like INFPs, and ENFPs do not like ISTPs. ISTPs do not like ENFPs. NE is the weakest function in ISTPs, and they don't value it. It's like, why are you digressing? Why are you going to concentrate on this particular situation, this context? I don't care about commonalities with others, going to be done about this one. That's how they see it. No complex equivalences. So, most disliked in others can be, and the inferior is liked in others. So, liked in others can be conflicts with others who resemble a type which has this function as its dominance. Usually the type avoids activities which draw in slot 8. So with avoiding the activities, again, they're not working on them. But again, non-type factors, if it's TE, then INFJ is going to do TE. Get by. But in some cases, it can be binary, and an all or nothing lacks appropriate degree sense. It tends to be totally avoided or used as a blunt instrument, usually without skill. E.g., an ESTJ or ESFJ resembler who makes rigid plans for the future, showing lack of nuance and intuition of development. NI. Because it's like they don't know how to sort of like, if the, like I was told by an ESFJ resembler that she plans 6 months in advance, and if the plan goes awry, she doesn't know how to adjust. And again, here I've got slot 6 in is stronger than slot 7 in my model in general, and I think it's consistent with the data. The data's model. The slot 6 is stronger than slot 8, even though both 1D and 8 is. For those Model A people, you want to see that? And then I did that bit about the logistical. Right, and then I'm going to go up here, and then I'm going to concentrate on, and again, the contrarian alternative, that the weakest lot. Back to here. So again, strongest, next strongest, then that, and then here's the weakest. No, way around. Strongest, weakest, debatable in the middle, but you know, the data would say these are stronger than these. Right, so now we're talking about the contrarian alternative, this one. We'll sort of climax with this. Functions in this column are the least valued. So in all experiments my FI, I've done a video on this, how Ben Vaserlan experiences FI. The function is slot 7, FI for me. Ooh. The function in slot 7 is usually recognized by the type as a weakness that can be worked on, albeit reluctantly. Degree of reluctance varies by type, e.g. FE DOMs keener to work on TE than SE DOMs to work on NE. Okay, imagine FE as a personified. Like if a person just if say it was a cartoon, it's like this cartoon figure represents FE. I'm in a workplace environment, and it's like, oh no, don't do me, we'll do you. So it's a self-effacing function. So it's like it's doing TE for FE reasons, because that's like what everybody else wants to do. And so in order to fit in, let's put the TE hat on. So FE can get good at TE, and he wants to do the TE for FE reasons. So it varies. So FE is a very self-effacing function. We'll do you, not do me. Right. We'll do your other cognitive process rather than FE. There's a certain element of truth in that. Also, FE DOMs got a lot of energy. For certain narrow uses, oh, wait a minute. FE DOMs keener to work on TE than SE DOMs to work on NE. That's just a better TI going on there, but I think it's pretty true. For certain narrow uses, the merits of this function can be seen by the type, even though it runs counter to the dominant function. So, when I was reading through this plane, making slight changes, I was sort of thinking, I had a feeling going on. I better cut that bit out about the Woodrow Wilson dartboard thing, because what happened was there was a linking bit of dialogue that was a little bit expositional, and it didn't feel right, it didn't feel real, it felt a little bit forced. So I thought, the heck with it, I'll cut out that self-indulgent joke about a Woodrow Wilson dartboard and a Winston Churchill dartboard. Controversial, but it went back on the gold standard. They increased the money supply by 7 times, yet they went back on the pre-war level of gold. No, you got to devalue 7 times, Winston. You caused the Great Depression because you had the Federal Reserve trying to support the pound. Right. World War I ruined this country. I never recovered. Right. And so I decided I had a feeling. The feeling was there. Not a TI thing, an FI thing. Better cut that out. Doesn't feel right. Cut it out. So in the situation, use the FI then. Well, you got a lot of FI with this. What does it feel like? This is the right thing to do. Right. Certain narrow uses, the merits of this function can be seen by the type, even though it runs counter to the dominant function. But that counter can sometimes be a useful counterpoint to the excesses of the lead function. So I came up with the term contrarian alternative, then I Googled it and found it's actually used in stocks. So it's like the contrarian alternative, like hedging your bets, but not in that sense. It's a counterpoint, counter view. It represents a counterpoint to the excesses of the lead function. Can sometimes be a useful counterpoint to the excesses of the lead function. It's not seen by the person as hedging their bets. So I shouldn't have said that. It represents the other side of the mindset of the type. Yeah, the 4 mindsets. So the EJ is our linear assertive, the EP is a flexible active, and then you've got balanced stable-ish. It represents the other side of the mindset of the type, e.g. the mindset of TI-NX is called balanced stable in humanitarian sociology, is introverted and rational. TI and FI are both introverted rational functions, so by definition, only TI and FI DOMs can have the BS mindset. Yeah, but the thing is, though, like composers and ISTPs have got like extroverting instincts going on, and like to improvise and stuff and be in the moment. So not so balanced stable, but by comparison with the EPs. In my humble opinion, A type prefers to stay in its mindset and so switches to and fro between its valued and unvalued mindset functions. So in other words, between Ti and Fi in the I little j, the Ti and Fi DOMs, between Te and Fe in the EJs, Ne and Se in the EPs, and Ni and Si in the I little p's, the Ni and Si DOMs. Enneagram 6, especially 641, INTP will switch between Ti and Fi more than E5 INTP. The author of this model Vaserlan resembles the INTP 641. To me, Fi is more important than Fe, but I enjoy being in an Fe state more than being in an Fi state. There you go, valued versus unvalued. And that is the climax. So in future, I will be going through, and I will fill out these, and I'll be doing it for ENTP because it's Wilma and Rena, ESFJ, based on a real person. So this is the this is the Model A Soci. Valued functions highlighted. I wonder if I could do that non-fungible token thing for this. Right, unique piece of art. So this is a little tester. Can you remember the positions? Well, what's this? We know what these are because these are the same as in MBTI. So let's go to INTP. So this is the test. You know these. You know these. You already know these. You know these. The question is, what's this? What's this? What's this? And what's this? That's the test. Right. Right there. Where are we going? Is there anything else? And again, my scores. My scores. I just gave the answer. All right. Again, the NT functions. We're not growing. Getting better. That was from the book, though. When I actually did the test, it sounded too mystical, so it was actually quite low when I did the cognitive processes. But it corresponds. Dario came up with that website to sell the book. FE is quite low, even though it's valued, and FI high. But again, it might be a thing where Western values. Anyhow, so I think that's it, and so that is Model V. Stop share screen. Right then, toodle pip. I'm gonna be off now, and so yeah, please subscribe, switch the notifications bell on, and that is the full explanation of this. Probably do this as the thumbnail. Right. The end.